It's the state of the dungeon. It's a video that Rob does about his games. Yeah! Hello, I am Rob, and this is my State of the Dungeon address for the game that took place on February 25th, 2021. The game was Mighty Protectors, and all current players were in attendance. With the added good news that one player who has fallen from the group should be coming back in the next session, so Muscles will be making his triumphant return. However, we had to bring back Rook's character. He was missing the last session, so while the characters retook action in the middle of the power chamber that was given over to occult energies, he walked out of a previously unnoticed door with a loud flushing noise and just walked out like nothing had happened, which worked out okay. So when we had last played, there was an altar that was hooked up to power conduits, and so incensed by this altar, Sentinel moved up and he smashed the altar with his power-armored fists. Unfortunately for him, this released a large upwelling of spiritual energy that channeled right through him. So he got kind of brain-fried. It had the net effect of scrambling his powers so that he lost his ability to enter the Speed Force and get super speed, which he wasn't happy with. But at the same time, it gave him the ability to dislodge his soul, forge it into a new body at will, and basically duplicate himself. And he also has picked up a few psychoses, mostly related to his experience of being a channel medium for all of these deceased Georgians who were purged in the Soviet takeover. So he was still in his battle suit, but he snapped out of the basically trauma of being forced to relive a lot of these different lives. He took control of himself again and basically said, nope, you're not using me this way. And the ghosts left him alone. So he was once more himself and able to act again, although again he wasn't feeling the greatest. So the group decided they were going to get out, leave the room. They were making some plans, but for the most part they needed to head on, and they were curious what the C power plant chamber was in their overview. They knew that N was nuclear, they knew that G was ghostly of some sort, but C was so curious to them, and so they opened the door to go into the hallway, whereon they met the reprisal force. See, Dorman had been sending people down below the fortress. So the group that they met with was the scientist who was able to expand his body and gain incredible strength. And in that moment, when they saw him, that was when Cyghost realized that he is her nemesis. And she was overwhelmed with a desire to beat him herself. And at the same time, they also found Captain Warford. He was now wearing power armor, and good stuff too, a step above the common fodder they had fought so far. And they had another battle suit with them. So it's a fairly tough fight. Well, at this point, Sentinel went first, and his initial attack, well, it turns out that Warford is very good at dodging. He's very experienced. So he wasn't able to land a hit on him. But he duplicated himself so that he would be able to, fight with his repulsor blasts as well as himself in the armor. Warford knew that Dorman had banished him. Just formed a door underneath him and poof, gone. So he deactivated his suit, his power armor, hard. Not only did it power it down, but it also blasted him with a set of modulated tones designed to render him unconscious, and boy did that work out. So Dorman was out of this fight. So it became a lot more even. Well, what basically happened was Cyghost and this scientisty guy sparred with each other. Cyghost was not winning this one. Turns out that her power blasts are energy-based, and he can absorb energy, much like Muscles was able to absorb physical attacks. Also, he's resistant to her psychic attacks. So he's defended against most of what she's able to do, which is kind of the nature of nemesis. They're designed to be a good fight for the person that they are the nemesis for. And at the same time, Bulwark's primary goal was to keep the boy that had been hooked up to the machines, was responsible for fueling their battlesuit creation. Tucked him out of the way so that he wasn't directly involved in the fight and hopefully couldn't get hurt. And of course, stood in front of him to protect him with his own body. This is a very Bulwark thing to do. Rook decided, you know what? He just shut down Dorman and his armor. I bet that if I can shut his ability to send out signals, I can stop that. So he uncorked his most powerful signal deadening ability he could do. Basically his multi-channel scream that shuts down every communication system in the area. He rolls a 1. I asked, okay, how do you win? How do you do well? The player says, I blow up, the signal is so powerful that it blows up the power packs on their armor. I'm like, well, he rolled a 1. All right, this happens. You do blow up the power packs on the armor. And then everyone else is like, wait, what? Oh yes, because not only did he blow up Warford's armor and his partner's armor, but he also took out Sentinel's armor, and he blew up the power supply in Dorman's armor. So nobody had powered armor anymore. This also, what they didn't realize was that this was his most powerful expression of that ability, which usually is capped at about 2 miles. And it usually is really just about stopping communications. This time, since he decided it was going to have a more physical effect and there's a nuclear power plant right by them, you can imagine where this is going. And it goes about as well as you think it would. So, at first they don't know about many of the problems that started with this, but it was bad enough that they couldn't use any of their communications, and things were just kind of, well, things slowed down a little bit. Rook threw a poison grenade at the battlesuits that they were fighting against, and Warford came out and got a good whiff. Now, it wouldn't even have come close. It wasn't a great throw, but, you know, Sentinel's beside himself these days, and while his initial throw wasn't so great, he threw it too far, his duplicate fired repulsor blast at the grenade to knock it back into play, and it worked. So, yeah. Basically, Warford took a good gulp of poison gas, which not good for him, certainly. Now, I did skip something, and I'm feeling kind of bad about this. Inside the altar was something that was trapped. And when it was damaged, it started to get loose. And originally Sentinel's idea was I'm going to slap a det pack on it and blow the altar up, but it blew up on its own. And inside was revealed to be another gifted. Standing about 5'9", with silvery skin, only depressions in the face where the eyes and mouth should be, but androgynous, and it addressed them with mental speech, introducing itself as Phantasmagoria, and telling them that he is a gifted, that Smash was basically, had imprisoned and was forcing him to provide power to them. He is able to deal with ghosts, you see. And that was the nexus of their psychic power source, was to basically imprison this guy and make him exist as a kind of a psychic battery. He was grateful for them for saving him, but his powers were drained. He had been constantly exhausted of power. As he was regenerating more, it was being thrown into summoning ghosts and using them to power their machinery. Diabolical, to say the least. Definitely not nice. And they got the idea that poor Phantasmagoria was originally in a mental institution and had suffered complete amnesia. Seems to be a decent enough chap, or lady. It's hard to tell. But really, they don't know who they were or what they are, and kind of at a loss. But they do know what their powers are. Phantasmagoria can imprint from surrounding ghosts, taking on their appearance, a little bit of their memories, and can talk through them. So he's like a perfect medium in a way. That's not all of his powers, though. So there's more. And they let him rest for a little bit, but he just didn't have enough power. So the fight is going on, and Warford is a nasty, tough fighter who has an energy pistol that could be dangerous. And while he's very, very skilled, Sentinel's good at dodging. It's kind of a wash. So nobody was having it really easy at this point. And unfortunately for her, Cygos was getting just pummeled because, again, he was resistant to most of her common attacks. Rook tried to stop him by increasing his gravity and hitting him with an energy burst. His electricity that travels along with his gravity control now. Problem? He feeds off of that. And he is more than strong enough to carry 8 times his own weight, so that didn't have any effect on him either. Though, the next thing that happened, Phantasmagoria came over to Bulwark, who's just kind of standing there unable to help out, because, he's protecting the boy. He's like, I'll protect him. I just wish I had more power. I could do something. Bulwark's like, wait a second. I've got this MacGuffin here. This MacGuffin allows me to store 10 points of power. Here, wear this. You'll feel great. You put it on and, whoa, that's nice. I could do this. Suddenly, Phantasmagoria grew to about 6'3", 6'4". He started getting a black cast over his metallic sheen. A trail of purplish smoke started swirling around him, and his face changed to be more like a sinister... Well, if you've ever seen the Batman, more modern Batman with the Scarecrow, like that. Like a jack-o'-lantern gone horribly evil. That pretty much sums him up. So he turned the corner looking at Warford, and he says, "Your sins have come for you." And Warford's like, holy crap. Blew his resistance, and he tried to run. As all of these ghostly hands start rising up from the ground, clawing at him, trying to drag him. An unnerving sight, to say the least. And then when Warford finally got up and tried running away into another hallway, as he rounded a corner, he saw something so scary. The others only saw a flash of light. He saw something so scary, he fainted dead away. This hardened killer, this combatant of many battlefields, passed away from whatever he saw. Or not passed away. He's still alive, but he went temporarily comatose. Which freed the rest of them to turn around and deal with the scientist guy who was attacking Cygos and beating her up. This was largely a couple of rounds fired from the submachine gun of Sentinel, as well as a flurry of gunshots from his duplicate, has a pistol. And the combined fire, the pistol missed, but not only did he hit with the submachine gun, he rolled a critical, which allowed him another immediate attack. So he shot him several times. The ammo, incendiary. Nasty, certainly. But the thing was, he wasn't able to absorb the fire because he had already absorbed an attack that round. So he was burning for real, but he was so maddened with rage to get after his nemesis, he didn't even notice. What he did notice, however, was when Cygos turned around and uncorked her new paralysis beam at him. which worked. He doesn't have a resistance to that. And I rolled a 20 for his resistance. So, very still he became. And after one of those sets in, you have a -10 to any subsequent saving throws. So he was going to be paralyzed for a while. The others kind of seemed to enjoy the pile-on and started thinking about bad things to do to him, mostly involving shooting him until he just was a bleeding chunk. And oddly enough, he faded from sight, vanishing. Not something that usually happens. So he was gone, and the group was free to collect themselves. They took Warford prisoner, looked over the power suits. The capacitors were completely blown. The suits were no longer able to handle power, so that's unfortunate. Found out that Dorman is comatose. He is also in a coma because of whatever happened to him in that suit was pretty bad. Warford had tried to do that to Sentinel, and Sentinel avoided that effect, so he knew what had happened. He just didn't know how bad that Dorman had taken it. It was bad. So they determined to press on. They really didn't have much else they could do, but now their instant get out of trouble card was gone because Dorman's unconscious. He can't form a gate to get them out of the compound anymore. So they had to figure out what to do. Well, they were in the hallway next to the power plant marked C, but they couldn't get in. The door was thick and heavy, a real blast door, and everything was completely powered down. It was the pneumatics in it were locked in place, so it would have taken literally ripping it apart, ripping it off of its hinge out of the concrete slabs on either side to get it out. They couldn't do it at that point. Not even Bulwark, when he was juiced up with his density control, could do that. So, what to do? Well, the next thing they knew, Hank DeVille showed up. You know, the lawyer guy who looks like a devil. He showed up and was like, hey, you guys are responsible for all this, are you? And they're like, yeah. Rook was in his glory. He had done something super cool that nobody else could do. So, and Hank's like, well, I was playing tag with the general. It sucks. That armor of his is really good. Most of the battle suits are shut down, but some of the more advanced models are still up and running, which is still bad. They're still tough. But most of the base is completely shut down. Everything is completely dead. They're like, yes, that's kind of what they wanted to do anyhow. Just completely scrag the base some way. So he's like, okay, I'll tell you what, I will go off and we will find a way to, you know, get us out of here. And they're like, we have a way to get out of here. We just have to wake Dorman up. He's like, well, over there in the decontamination room, there's probably medical supplies and things. So they took him in, and yes, there were medical supplies. At this point, Bulwark was feeling curious. That C power room was still calling to him. So he went intangible and went in. Big mistake. The C was a chemical reaction plant. Very high tech. Taking some pretty scary stuff and gleaning power out of the reaction. Unfortunately, all the containment and mechanization of this room was shot by Rook. So it was an entire inferno covering every single part of the inside as the chemicals combined, fired, and just out of control. The entire room was not as hot as possible. It was a constant 900 some odd degrees in there the whole time. And it was covered in kind of greenish flame. So when Bulwark went in, he got badly burned. And lucky for him, because he completely botched any chance of rolling with it, he rolled natural 20 again. He walked in and immediately just got knocked back. So he didn't fall unconscious, stay in, and die. Probably for the best. So he's badly hurt. And he uses his healing gizmo to help himself out. He's used it a couple of times to help people. And for the most part, while the group is in fairly decent shape, many of them are badly drained in power. Bulwark is barely going. So they start pumping Rook and Sentinel for power, since they don't use very much. And basically siphoning it into the energy gimmick that that Bulwark ended up cobbling together with his inventing points. So, while they're getting their power together, they get Dorman up. Dorman is not happy because what they pump him with basically causes some deep-seated medical issues. It actually hurts him. But he gets conscious, and they're like, okay, we got to get out of here. And Dorman's like, well, I can open us a portal. But they really wanted to loot the place. So they wanted to get up to the warehouse level. Dorman found out where that was. He was able to open up a door. They went through and ended up back in their little crate fortress that they had made to give them some privacy. When they all went through, they reoriented themselves, and DeVille's like, at the other end of this hall, there's a motor pool. That's how they move these crates around, really. And they do have a cargo hauler truck. They're like, okay, great. We need to get there. So DeVille took Dorman, and they went to go and see, and sure enough, he was able to make a door back to the Cube Fortress so they could all go into the motor pool. Now, several vehicles had been turned around and their lights had been turned on so that, could provide some light to the area. So they found the truck, got it up and running, everything's going all right, but they're like, well, what are we going to do? The original idea was, well, we're just going to drag a couple of crates through one of Dorman's gates and, call it good. The truck allowed them to take it elsewhere. And then they got an offer of help from somebody they weren't expecting. The boy woke up. The boy in the wheelchair. And he offered to help them. I'm like, okay. He introduced himself as Oliver. A young boy who is gifted, and his power is being able to make technology out of his imagination. It's a very, very strong power. It has limits, but he basically offered to turn the truck into a hover truck with a stealth field. They couldn't pass that up. So they quickly loaded up what they could. They made good rolls so that they got choice bits of equipment, gear, and material. And Dorman opened up a gate, and they drove the truck through. Now, Dorman found out the hard way, because he never really taxed his power that much, but the more he puts through his gate, the more power it drains out of him. So passing a truck and all the cargo through as well as everybody, he was hurting by the time they went through the portal himself. So they just threw him on top of the truck and put Chauffeur in to the truck. And Chauffeur and Oliver hit it off great, because if you can basically enter into any kind of vehicle, wouldn't you like somebody who could immediately customize it the way you want using their mutant powers? I really have fun playing around with the various mutant powers that are available in mutants or in Villains and Vigilantes, and I've always been intrigued by how you can tweak many of them. So while I'm making some liberties with some of the powers that technically aren't in the book, by following the general guidelines and rules, it's actually pretty easy to do things, like even Oliver's power, which is all over the map. But, I have very firm limits in mind, so it works out pretty well. So they start flying away. Everything seems like it's going pretty well. Eventually, they even end up finding a flight of power suits that are trying to stop them from, going south into Turkey, which is where they're heading. However, the couple of things had happened up to that point. Phantasmagoria decided he wanted to show off a little bit. So while they were flying, he basically made the entire truck look like basically a gothic flying haunted carriage, and himself looking like the Hell's Undertaker driving it, and enjoying the novelty of it. Ghost asked for a little redecoration, and he turned her into a barbed wire princess version of Cinderella. Think Sally from A Nightmare Before Christmas and go further, and that's where you were. Mouthful of sharp, hideous fangs with bright blood red lipstick and the barbed wire, and just, yeah, pretty gruesome and horrifying, but still its own way. So that scared some of the locals, but eventually when they got to the battle suits, it was better to not draw attention, so they turned that off. And honestly, I rolled so badly for those pilots. They did not see the group at all, despite the fact they had special sensing equipment that actually could have pierced through and detected the stealth field, but they have to be looking in that area first, and they didn't. So they got into Turkey. From then, it was pretty easy. Getting into Turkey, they were contacted because Chauffeur told Veronica where they could be met. They got to basically the point where the stresses on the truck from Oliver's changes started to impede the truck, and rather than it breaking down, they just stopped it. Then they were met by a helicopter, loaded the truck onto the helicopter, which took them to an Air Force base for Turkey. From there, they caught a flight off to Germany. Germany is a convenient clearinghouse for them. It's where a lot of their backers in Europe are. And also, the military, the U.S. military still does operations there sometimes. So, they arrived in Germany and contacted Veronica, and Veronica's like, hey, congratulations on succeeding. Smash is badly confused, broken up, what have you. But we do have some issues. Number one, you got new people. So we're offering a place for Oliver, we're offering a place for Phantasmagoria, and we're offering a place for Mr. DeVille. Well, Mr. DeVille is a little stung because before they left, he went and he procured a battle suit. He wanted one of these things. He realized how great they were. So he got an advanced model, and they had this idea of getting another one by engaging with the patrols and just having him body swap with the pilots. They could knock out the pilots, and they'd have these suits of armor. And Hank was like, yeah, that's not a terrible idea. Here, take my highly advanced suit. Don't put a scratch on it. I'll let Bulwark go in, as he's the smart guy. He could probably figure out how to run it. And I will go and get ready to get those other battle suits. Well, did I mention that, the player for Bulwark was rolling a lot of 20s? He rolled 2 20s back to back on how he dealt with being in this battle suit. He basically fell off the truck and smashed the battle suit into the ground. Broke it badly. DeVille is not happy. So when he got invited to join the crusade by Veronica, he's like, I'd rather be a free agent. I got a lot of opportunities on my plate, and quite honestly, you guys seem to get into a lot of conflict. I don't really want to deal with more than I've already got. Some angel guy who wants to kill me, who could fire out fire. So they're like, okay, well, as long as you're on our side and, we can count on you for help from time to time, that would be great. He's like, okay, I don't see a problem with that. Veronica said, okay, you guys have been through a lot. And you've accomplished everything we could have asked of you in this last mission. You threw Smash for a loop, you cost them some materiel, you found some really wrong stuff, you recovered a couple of gifted, they had captured Warford, and had him in custody. They're like, she recognized Warford, by the way. She's really keen on interrogating him herself. He's not a nice guy. She's like, you know what? You guys, you deserve a vacation. You're in Germany. See the sights. Here, I'll wire you 5,000 euros. Just have fun. Just be tourists for a little while. Things are kind of crazy right now, but, we'll make things work. Now, this is at the cusp of when everything gets locked down from coronavirus. So, there are a lot of things have already been locked down, but, They get met up with a guy named Dieter. Rather ruggedly good-looking guy with a big, thick mustache, or beard. And he offers to show them around. He's very cordial and, gets them some authentic German food. And they have a couple of days ahead of them, but they found out something. In Munich, they are having Gifted Con. Something that was thrown together. Despite the fact the Gifted have only been around for a little while, they have taken the imagination of the Germans. And they're already throwing together a convention in place of what would have been Comic-Con. Because that was completely pulled out by the backers after the coronavirus. So now somebody is whipping up this Gifted Con. And they already have a number of panelists who are themselves gifted and other talking points who want to talk about the Gifted. And all these people are celebrating that superheroes are walking amongst them. So they're really, really happy about all this. Obviously, it'll be a bit weird with masks and everything and trying to social distance, but it's an opportunity to do something cool and be recognized as cool heroes by our heroes. So I think several of them are looking forward to this. And also Muscles is coming back, so that's going to be interesting. So that is where we will be starting next time with Gifted Con in a superhero game, superhero convention. Too much fun. All right, thank you very much, everybody. I am Rob. This has been my State of the Dungeon address, and I hope that you join me next time where we will continue the story. Thank you, and farewell.